I'm back. Hi. Yes, like I said, we're going to be mass recording, but if it's not already a hint as to what this recording is, I mean, not like you guys didn't see the title of this video. But the flannel is here. Still same shirt, but flannel is here. That means we are doing a Fright Day episode. I just did one yesterday, but you know, that's the mass recording life. We gotta get shit done. So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into this. I know the last one I kind of went into a whole kind of spiel type thing, but yeah, we're just gonna jump right into it this time. So, all right, we're gonna go ahead and hit the intro, and here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Phoenix Reads. Today's episode is a series of scary stories. It is Fright Day. As usual, the usernames of the users whose stories we're reading will be in the description below. Please go give their story and any others that they may have done some love. And feel free to leave a comment on their post and even tag me in the comment, letting them know that you heard their story here. My username for Reddit is in the description. You can even tag me in stories you'd like to hear me read. We'll get started right after this ad. Da, da, da. This is also a very, I'm probably going to mention it in the actual recording, but this is also a very special episode. This is technically episode 10 of Fright Day. 10 episodes that I have been recording scary stories. It's kind of crazy. I just think that's so bizarre to me that we've been doing this for 10 episodes now. I don't know. I might feel differently when it's like episode 50 or 100, but for right now, I am still very much excited, and I think it is very cool. And I am much more prepared for reading this episode than I usually am, and so I am very excited about that. Let me get this a little bit closer and get you guys situated a little bit more. Hermione, you gonna come join us? Oh, in case anybody was curious, the support gnome pillow making an appearance. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started into the girth of this actual episode. All right, thank you guys for sticking around after that episode. We are just gonna roll right into this because some of these that I have for today are a little girthy, but we like that. We like girthy stories. We like depth. We like all of that. We like twists. We like turns, and hopefully we have some of those today. All right, this first one is called Abstinent Andy. Todd had been suspecting his girlfriend of infidelity for some time. When he received a tip that she was going to be at the Pool of Aphrodite, as teenagers nicknamed the shallow lake in the woods where they would sneak off to make out and throw inappropriate parties, he knew he had to catch her in the act. Todd had brought his camera along to make sure she could not deny it. The young couple had stopped talking and had begun kissing. Soon they were naked. Todd readied his camera and was about to take a shot when the night vision feature of his camera caught a large, lumbering figure standing perfectly still behind a tree. The figure was in a mascot costume. The head was large and round. His face was fixed in a perpetual grin with large teeth, and his eyes were cold and dead. It took a step out of the shadows, wielding a large axe. Too busy with their lewd act, the young couple failed to notice the hulking giant behind them. Todd watched in horror as it took a mighty swing with the axe, taking the guy's head clean off. Blood spurted from the severed neck and drenched his girlfriend, whose back was against a tree. Only then did she open her eyes to witness the gore. She screamed as the body dropped to the ground, and the person in the costume took another swing of the axe, biting into her shoulder and taking her right arm clean off. Todd watched helplessly as the figure took swing after swing until his girlfriend was nothing more than a dismembered corpse. The mascot threw a handful of paper at the dead people. at the dead couple. Then he walked over to where a frightened Todd was hiding. He looked left and right, searching for Todd's partner. Seeing no one, he reached into his pocket and gave Todd a folded piece of paper. Then slowly walked deeper into the woods, dragging the bloodied axe behind him. Todd had just encountered Abstinent Andy, and the folded paper was an anti-sex pamphlet. Abstinent Andy was an urban legend, originally created by a group of concerned mothers to prevent their teenage children from having premarital sex. He would go around schools, passing out anti-sex pamphlets to teens, warning them of the dangers of premarital sex and the importance of abstinence. He is tall and large, and wears a costume with the bulbous head of a man with a wide smile and big, lifeless eyes. Now a deranged killer, Abstinent Andy is determined to preserve the innocence of teens, even if he has to kill them to do it. He lurks in the woods and hidden places where teens throw parties and make out. He prevents young couples from having sex by hacking them into pieces and leaving anti-sex pamphlets on their corpses. No one knows who he is or where he comes from, but he is hell-bent on fulfilling his mission of abstinence. Woo! I don't think I was prepared. I had a feeling when I read the title, because again, for any of the newcomers, for anybody that doesn't know, I don't read these before I read them on stream or during recordings. It is all 100% a blind react. And so, I mean, I probably should have realized that this was a sex story. And it was a very good one. A very good one. But it's definitely, like, I don't know. At the same time, it still, like, took me by surprise because I wasn't sure where it was going, you know? So, yeah, I mean, now we've got the Tooth Fairy to worry about. Now we've got Abstinent Andy. I'm just gonna truck on with the next one because that one was good. All right. Dying in the bathroom. It was supposed to be just a quick piss before heading back to binge on Netflix, until I was pushed from behind, which led me to fall on my neck, definitively cutting off the blood flow to my head. Before completely fading from consciousness, I saw that my attacker wasn't from this world. He was slightly translucent and floating a few inches above the ground. My senses were barely holding on at that point, but I heard him say something like, "What the fuck?" Oh, what a fuck. This led my mind to immediately go back and remember all the elderly relatives and acquaintances I've pissed off over the years, wondering which of them held the biggest grudge against me, that they'd come back from the afterlife just to tell me I'm a fuck after offing me themselves. As I was lost in this train of thought, I hadn't even noticed that the Reaper had already come to fetch my soul. He informed me that before he could take me completely, I must make a choice. Return to the happiest moment of my life for a few seconds, or retaliate against the person of my choosing. I paused and realized that this choice must have been given to the same mysterious relative who was my would-be killer. I chose to take my revenge against this soul, and the Reaper sent me back to my bathroom. I saw the killer still standing there near the toilet where my body presumably fell to its demise. I shoved him on one side to force him to turn around and look at me. This caught him by surprise, and he fell on the floor, cracking his neck. All I could say after seeing him was, "What the fuck?" Oh, that was good. That was really good. I love stories like this that may not be long, but have that nice little twist at the end that just, I love them. They are so good. I always get such a kick out of those. All right. This next one is definitely going to be the first of our girthy ones. We will definitely see where this leads us. Dad had a hole in his head. I'm not sure which was weirder. The fact that Dad had a hole in his head, or the fact that he was so unimpressed with it. Dad had come home from his job at the steel mill, just as he had 1,000 times. We heard him sit his hard hat by the door as he stripped out of his jumpsuit before coming to dinner. Mom had meatloaf on the table with potatoes and peas, Dad's favorite, and we waited patiently for him to arrive, just like always. If this sounds weird to you, that's because it should. Dad had a strange idea that he should go to work, that Mom should stay home and keep the kids, and that everything should be like an episode of Leave It to Beaver when he got home. I remember for a while that Mom would meet him at the door with a cold glass of beer when he came home, but eventually Dad told her to stop so the dust from the mill didn't get on her. It was odd, but Dad paid the bills, and that's just how he liked it, so that's what we did. Mom had gotten half of her welcome home greeting out before it curdled in her throat. My brother had already seen it, but I was still looking at the TV around the corner and hadn't seen it yet. MTV was playing a song by a band I liked, and I looked up to ask Mom if I could use the bathroom when I noticed Dad's head. Dad, meanwhile, has sat down at the table like nothing was amiss, opening his napkin and putting it on his lap. He was hungry from his day at work, and he had started asking us about our day when he saw how horrified we looked. "What?" he asked. "What's the matter?" All three of us were speechless for a moment. How did he not realize what had us all so gobsmacked? Surely he had to feel that. He had to realize what had happened to him. There was no way that a person could be oblivious of something like that. In the center of Dad's forehead was a hole big enough to stick your pinky finger into. It wasn't like a wound. Wounds usually bleed or appeared red or scabby. This one was simply a black hole in his forehead. The edges looked a little ragged, but that more reminded me of a hole that someone had drilled into the pavement. As strange as the hole was, the fact that it didn't seem to have an exit point was even stranger. "Honey," Mom asked, trying to be diplomatic about the situation, "did something happen at work today?" "No," Dad said, looking at her speculatively. "Well, Stubbins had changed the no-slip grading on the walkways, but that's not really weird." "Are you sure nothing odd happened today?" she asked, trying to tiptoe around the matter so she didn't upset him. Sometimes Dad could have a temper, and none of us wanted to see it. "I guess maybe," he seemed to think about it. "There was that guy I bumped into on the sidewalk. I fell down and he helped me up, but it was nothing." When she continued to look at him skeptically, he set his fork down angrily and glowed at her. "Look, Martha, if you have something to ask, just go ahead and ask it. I'm trying to eat here." "Dad, there's a hole in your head." I was never what you'd call subtle. Dad wrinkled his eyebrows at me. "What the hell are you talking about?" "There's a big hole in your forehead. How do you not feel that?" "Are you trying to be funny? 'Cause you know I don't like jokes." Despite his gruff tone, he began feeling around his forehead as if trying to find the source of our discomfort. He seemed half-hearted, like he was just doing us a favor by looking in the first place. But when his fingers touched the ragged edges of the hole, he shuddered a little. I didn't think it was a hurt shudder. Not really. It was more like the shudder you get when you find an itch and scratch it. He inspected it with his fingers for a moment before getting up to look at it in the bathroom mirror. The three of us hovered just outside the door as he looked at it in the mirror, and we must have looked like some old comedy routine as we waited for his prognosis. After a few minutes of poking and prodding at it, he finally turned away and walked past us, leaving us just standing in the hallway. We found him at the kitchen table, eating his dinner like any other night. "Sit down," he told us once he noticed we were there. "Your mother's meatloaf is getting cold." "Dad," I started, but Mom put a hand on my shoulder. "Harold, there's a hole in your head. Don't you think we should go to the hospital?" Dad turned his emotionless gaze on her, making it clear that he didn't want to talk about it. When we didn't move, he growled in his throat in a deeply phlegmy way. "Doctor would just poke at it and charge me an arm and a leg. Not going to no doctor. Now sit down and eat." He went back to eating, ignoring us until we returned to the table and began eating again. We all tried not to notice the hole as we ate, but it was hard to ignore. As we sat and watched TV that night, the TV screen seemed to reflect off that dark hole. Mom laughed every time the audience did, but Dad never laughed. Well, that's not true. Dad did this thing when he found something funny. 1 part chuckle and 9 parts phlegmy rumble. When I was a kid, I had asked Mom once why Dad never laughed or smiled, and she had told me that he laughed often and smiled daily. "It's just harder to tell with your father. He's not quite as obvious about it as we are." After that, I started paying more attention to Dad, and I had come to a point where I could pick up on the subtle twitches at the corner of his mouth, the gravely rumbles when he chuckled, the minute crinkling at the edges of his beetle black eyes. They helped me tell when Dad was in a good mood, when he felt less like hitting and more like patting, when you could maybe ask him for a favor, and when it was best to just leave him alone. It was a talent my younger brother never learned, and it was a mistake that often earned him a cuff across the back of the head when he tried to hit up Dad for money. Dad was enjoying the byplay tonight as Ray Roman bemoaned everything from his mother to his job, but my mind was still firmly fastened on the hole. As I watched it, I almost fancied that I could see it expand and retract, as though it were breathing. I told myself it was the light from the TV, but the longer I watched, the surer I became that it was moving. It was like a ragged mouth, pulling in and pushing air out. It was subtle, like my father's moods, and the longer I watched, the more apparent it became. When my father turned his gaze on me, I realized he had caught me staring. "Either go to bed or stop staring at me. You're creeping me out." I pushed off the love seat and went to my room. I knew I wouldn't be able to focus on anything as long as that hole was on display. The next few days were uneventful, but I noticed that Dad started wearing a hat when he went out somewhere. I wished he would wear one inside too, because the hole seemed to always be watching me whenever I was around him. It wasn't, of course, because it didn't have any eyes, but I could feel that itchy feeling you sometimes get when someone is staring at you. It looked like it was getting bigger too, but if it pained Dad, he didn't say anything about it. He mostly ignored it, his only exception to ignorance being that he wore outside. Dad was stubborn, but he wasn't foolish. Dad was a sensible person who liked to keep attention off himself. Over the next 10 days, the hole got noticeably bigger. When we'd first seen it, I could have maybe put a finger inside it. Now, I could have easily put several in there, and still, he refused to go to the hospital. Mom tried to coax him, but he said it wasn't worth bothering a doctor over. If it was bad, it would hurt, and it doesn't. If it's meant to go away, then it'll do it on its own. He went to work, came home, watched TV, and all the time that hole continued to grow. I found myself looking at my father more and more often. That gaping chasm seemed to look at me even through his hat when he wore it. I started dreaming about that hole, and in my dreams it oozed and bled, and a single eyeball rolled around and looked at me. No matter what Dad was doing in the dream, that eye stared at me until I came awake gasping. Then, one day, he came to breakfast, and the hole had taken in his eyebrows. It wasn't a hole now. It was more like a pit, a crater, that just so happened to sit in the middle of my father's head. Mom was left with an egg halfway to her mouth as she stared into that gaping void. We could all see it breathing now, the push and pull of its respirations as it drew in its terrible breath. Dad sat, eating his own eggs and grits, pretending that nothing was wrong, but it was clear that he felt it too. He refused to answer any of us when we called his name and left for work with only half of his breakfast eaten. I noticed that when he came home from work that day, there was a different hard hat on the table in the entryway. The hard hat had a slant to it, and it would better cover the hole. Dad may act like nothing was wrong, but I couldn't. I started avoiding him. I would come down for breakfast after I knew he had gone to work. I would make excuses to stay out so I could miss dinner. I did any number of other things to avoid being in the house, but it hardly seemed to matter. I had begun to hear some kind of whispering as I lay in bed at night, and it permeated my dreams as the I inside began to whisper words I couldn't understand. The words were alien, harsh, and unwantable, but I felt I knew their meaning. My sleep became as ragged as my father's moods. If I hadn't been barely into my senior year of high school, I think I had moved out. Then, about a month and a half after the spot appeared, Dad didn't come down for breakfast. Mom told us that Dad wasn't feeling well. She said he must have gotten sick in the night, but the way her eyes looked told me something beyond sickness was at play. He didn't go to work that day, and unknown to us, he would never go back to work again. Mom moved into the guest bedroom, and I wouldn't find out until later that it was because Dad locked the door and wouldn't let her in. We could hear him in there as he bumped around. Mom would leave his food in the hallway, but we never saw him take it. This went on until one morning when I forgot my notebook upstairs. I had been heading to school, leafing through my bag, when I realized I'd forgotten my biology notebook. I had a test that day, and I wanted to study before class. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard the door to my parents' bedroom open. I stopped halfway up, not sure whether I should continue or not. None of us had seen Dad since he went into hiding, and my brother and I had been very curious about what had happened with the hole. I put my fingers on the carpet and scampered slowly up the stairs, peeking over the edge of the stairs as I heard the scrape of silverware being bumped. I could see my dad's back, clad in a robe and knee socks, as he bent over of the day's breakfast tray that my mom had left for him. He seemed to be having trouble grabbing it, and his hands threatened to knock over the juice that sat beside the bowl of oatmeal. Then he stood, and I had to put a hand over my mouth as his head came into view. The top of his head looked like nothing so much as one of those cartoon holes that they used to trap each other. It was a swirling black vortex that looked a mile deep, and he turned to go back into the room. I could see the hole was like some kind of optical illusion. It was exactly as deep on the other side as it was on the back. He turned and took the tray into the bedroom, but when he bumped the tray on the corner of the door, I realized why we had heard him banging around so much the last few days. In my dreams, the hole always has an eye, but in reality, it had stolen my father's sight. The dreams became different after that. Every night, I dreamed that my family was eating around the breakfast table. My brother sat to my left, and my mom to my right. Dad sat across from me, bent over his breakfast as usual. They all sat eating food from a massive pile, their breakfast more like a buffet. They all sat, I seemed to be the only one paying attention to the strange creature wearing my father's clothes, and the food he ate was pushed into the circling hole atop his head. As I watched, the eye emerged again, but it wasn't alone this time. The eye was in a face, and the face was long and terrible. The skin was tan and leathery, like a hide left in the sun too long. The hair was white and fine like a corpse's. Its teeth were jagged and yellow, its eyes the cataract threads of the chronically blind. and when his face rolled around to look at me, I would shake as his lips rose into an almost comical grin. As everyone ate, the mouth opened, and a low whispering began to assault my ears. Every night, that whisper became a little louder, and over time, I came to understand the words. Shally, shally, may ray. Fory, fory, may gra. Li roly, grey ga. Su roly, dre ma. The words slid into my ear like slugs, coating my brain in the forbidden knowledge they possessed. I wasn't sure what the dreams meant, but I knew they were meant for me. Was this the thing that had been staring at me all this time? Was this the reason I had felt watched? As the dreams continued, I began humming or reciting the words it spoke to myself during the day. I would catch myself making little rhymes out of them, and they were never far from my mind. It was almost soothing to speak those words, a balm to the terrible dreams and the terrible fear that wormed its way through my mind. I knew what it wanted me to do, and one night, I did my part. I needed to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, my bladder full to bursting. I was leaving the bathroom when I noticed that the door to my parents' room was open for the first time in a while. There was a noise coming from inside, and it sounded pained. I thought maybe one of the dogs had gotten in there and gotten hurt. But I think, even then, I knew what I would find. Dad was on the ground, his swirling head practically hyperventilating as it pulled in and out. The swirls had taken in Dad's shoulders and the top of his chest, and he was laying on the floor and flopping around as his arms protruded from the vortex. I reached down and helped him sit with his back to the bed. He couldn't talk. He probably couldn't even see, but he seemed to understand that I was here to help him. As I looked at the swirling mass, though, I felt the words come to my lips. I don't know if they were intentional, but I know that they were the words that needed to be said. Shally, shally, may ray. Fory, fory, may gra. Li roly, grey ma. Grey ga. Su roly, dre ma. As the words fell from me, I saw something swirling in the mass of shadows. I was worried it would be a huge eye, like the one I'd seen in my dreams. But I was even more afraid that it would be the ancient face that I often saw amidst the vortex. I'm sorry, I can't talk today. As it swirled and thumbed, I could see the white hair beginning to sprout from the depths. The head was coming on fast, and as those eyes emerged from the depths, I could see the corners cast up in a smile. My shaky legs took me away from him with small, stuttery steps. His face came free of the murk, but it wasn't done yet. As his head slid free, a withered form emerged beneath it. He was naked, looking like some kind of wizened mummy, as his leathery skin slid out of the dark pool. Below the black pit that was my father's head, his body began to shrivel up like a 4th of July firework, becoming blackened embers before my eyes. The more of that evil thing that came free, the less of him there was. And when his withered feet touched down onto the soft carpet of my parents' bedroom, what remained of my father simply blew away. The old man reached down for the grubby bathrobe that my dad had been wearing and tittered as he pulled it around himself. Took you long enough, but I guess I can't be too upset. You and your father have served me well, though. You never realized you were doing it. Your reward is not sharing in his fate. Your punishment is knowing you are responsible for my return to this world. What you do with these gifts is up to you. He left then, just walked right out of our house and into the night. As the sun comes up over Mom's kitchen, I realized I've been writing this since I managed to get back to my feet and walk shakily down the stairs. I've been trying to write down as much of my experience as possible so I won't forget any of it. but it's so weird that it's hard to put all into words. What the hell was that thing that ultimately killed my father? Did it make the hole in his head? Why him? As I sit here, watching the sun come up, I realize I may never know. Woo! We read, I think, almost a story of this writer's every single time. I think it's Erutious, Erutious. He is the one who is the author of our Grandpa series that we always do in our extras. Well, for you just listening audioly, it is an extra. It's an extra episode. But for those watching on YouTube and watching live on TikTok, it is just all one video. But I am never disappointed by one of his stories. Never. At all. He is absolutely I am so glad to have found his stories because they are just so good. They are always worth the read. Alright, I'm going to take a drink real quick, and then we are going to continue with the next one, which is also a long one, and may actually be our last. We will see. I know it's been a hot minute since I've had multiple long ones, and I want to make sure that we get through all of this one. Weird, okay. I am stuck in a haunted dormitory. I sighed in relief. The dorm room is better than I expected. It was not hard to exceed my expectations. I imagined it to be completely run down, given that the building is older than life itself. Nevertheless, I got disappointed in a good way. My soon-to-be roommate has not arrived yet, so I got the privilege of choosing the bed first. The mattress squeaks as I place my weathered luggage on it. I guess discreet bed activities are out of the picture now. Before anything, I examine the room's condition. I will not be held responsible for other people's damages. As I roam around the room, running my fingers along the walnut parquets that cover the wall, looking under the beds, opening the table's cabinets, I notice a paper attached to the inside of the front door. My stomach fills with anxiety. I really fucking hope it's not what I think it is. I strode to the door, rip off the note, and hurriedly glance through it, looking for the typical words and phrase they use. Fuck me, that bitch lied to me. I made sure that you will only have to focus on your studies while at university. I imitated her voice in my head in a sarcastic tone. Explain this. I hit the paper and then defeatedly fall to the floor. For a minute, I consider setting the list and this whole fucking building on fire. But I swallow the urge. I take a deep breath, and a second one, and a third one. Shit. This is my reality now. I better face it with the facts. Welcome to Silver Hall. I am so excited that you chose Silver River Dorms for this semester to accommodate you. I roll my eyes. No one would fucking choose you if they knew the horror that they are going to face here, I shout in my head. I hope you will enjoy your room and find your temporary home in it. I am sure you have noticed by now that every room is well equipped and both the furniture and the bathroom are in good condition. If not, let us know and we will fix it for you at no charge. Every time. Every fucking time. It starts almost sickeningly sweet, but it always ends up being an eternal damnations. I am not even mad or terrified at this point, just fucking annoyed. Every floor has its own resident assistant. Their phone numbers and other availabilities are written down at the end of this letter. They are here to guide you and answer any of your questions, but please, be considerate of their time and needs when reaching out. The following list will present rules that you need to follow while living here. Some of them might seem a bit strange to some people, but I can assure you that they are serious. Keeping them is never an option, but a must. 1. Keep noise at a tolerable level. Besides you, many other students live here, each one with different needs and schedules. Behave the way you expect others to treat you. 2. Clean up the kitchen after using it. This includes washing your dishes, cleaning any spills, and taking care of leftovers in a timely manner. 3. Make sure your guests follow the rules as well. Before having guests over, you have to fill out the official form found at the reception desk 24 hours before the stay and have to be approved by the resident director. While their stay, you are responsible for them and any damages caused by them. 4. Do not answer your door if there is a knock between the hours of 2 and 3 in the morning. It might sound like your roommate has lost their key, the RA requesting an emergency examination of the room, but I can assure you it is never the case. Every drill and examination will be done during the daytime. 5. Ignore the petite Asian girl in the lobby who claims her name is Lilith. She may try to talk to you or might offer to help with just the problem you are struggling with. By no means should you invite her back to your room if you make the mistake of interacting with her. Please inform your RA if she is seen. I would have assumed the Queen of Hell has more responsibilities than to linger around recently turned adults, but who am I to judge? Maybe it'll make her feel young again. 6. If someone is waiting outside of the dormitory main door for someone to open the door and let them in, instead use the building's other exit on the opposite side of the hall. If you happen to be in a situation where you opened the door for them, do not, under any circumstances, give verbal permission to enter the lobby. They might try to prompt an invitation, but just ignore them. Immediately close the door and inform your RA. 7. You may return from classes to find small objects in your room that have been moved around. This is a harmless phenomenon that happens around here from time to time. No need to trouble your RA with it. I grunt. Fucking fairies. Never respecting one's privacy and belongings. At least the demons always knock at the same time. Have some consistency, you tiny little flying fucks. 8. The occasional soft scream or distant roar in the middle of the night is nothing you need to worry about. Again, this is usually harmless. If you have not broken any other rules mentioned in this list. 9. Drugs and alcohol are strictly prohibited. They can't be serious. Fuck you! I will fucking pour down whiskey on Lilith's head and set it on fire while smoking a joint. You cannot fucking stop me. I let out a deep sigh and shake my head. Another activity is crossed out on my to-do list. Not only are they illegal, but they can also blur your senses of what is real and what is not, thereby making it easier for you to make the mistake of breaking one of the rules. 10. If you notice a shadow person in your vicinity, I advise you to ignore them, or at the very least try pretending. They can only harm you if you pay a great deal of attention to them. If you keep up your act for a longer period of time, they will leave you alone. The better you pay no mind to them, the sooner you get rid of them. But be prepared, ignoring them will not be easy. Whoever wrote this list clearly does not have much experience with the supernatural. I just have to bribe the fairies with honey, and I will have my own flying army of mini teeth and flowery skirts. They will devour any shadow person that means to harm me. However, they will still move my stuff. 11. There is no sub-basement in Silver River Hall. If the elevator takes you to one, do not leave the elevator or permit anyone/anything to enter. They will usually require an invitation to do so. Usually? Sounds promising. I am just going to use the stairs. 12. Any men in robes carrying torches and/or bloody daggers around in the middle of the night who claim to be members of the Gloria Malai are doing initiation ceremonies and should be avoided. The Glory of Evil. Very creative, not at all boring. I have not seen it on every Satanist t-shirt. Maybe I will recommend them a more exciting name once I bump into them. Satan and the Mean Guys of Hell. Satan and the Soulless. The Bloodied Gang. Stop screaming my dad's name during sex. Maybe I should finish the list before my mind wanders too far away. 13. If you do not see your roommate for more than 24 hours, please inform your RA, even if he or she has left you a note claiming to have gone home for the weekend. We have ways of verifying these things. 14. Campus security officers' first priority is the good of Silver River University and not your safety. This means that at times they may minimize your concern or try to cover up things that happen on campus that would make the university look bad. With this in mind, you should first talk to a member of the residence life staff at Silver River Hall if you have any questions or concerns about your safety. We will protect you the best we can. John Smith, Resident Director. Well, that was a handful. Nothing surprising or something I have not dealt with before, but I should not be cocky. With these creatures, nothing is certain. I push myself from the ground and place the list on my roommate's bed. I hope she has strong nerves and common sense. I would hate to switch roommates so frequently. I look away from the paper and grab my wallet from my suitcase. Instead of dooming my future in advance, I should ready myself for war. I need to make preparations for the wonderful journey I will have at Silver River University with demons and other shit-faced creatures. The first night, we heard the knocks. In the beginning, they were subtle, almost as if it did not want to wake us up. Once I realized the time, my natural annoyance took control. I just grabbed my headphones and blasted them with music. Christian rock, to be specific. I do not know if it realizes the passive-aggressive message I am sending to it. They never seem to be aggravated by it. But it makes me feel fuzzy and warm inside. Knowing that, at least I can say, fuck you in some way. I was so engrossed with the song about loving Jesus that when Rachel shook my shoulder, I almost fell off the bed. What the fuck, Rachel? I press my palm to my heart. I feel it beating furiously. I am sorry, her voice filled with dread, barely able to keep her tears back. It says, it is our neighbor, Raymond. It asks for our help. He says that hooded people took his roommate. I sit up, brush my hair out of my face, and turn my table lamp on. Rachel squeals in horror when the light turns on. Don't worry, the rule says you cannot answer the door. It does not restrict the room's lighting. She grabs my hand. Are you sure? They already know we are here and awake. What's the point in covering the darkness? I, for one, will make myself comfortable and watch some Netflix. Want to join? She looks at me baffled, almost as if she cannot decide whether I am just a trick played by the demons or not. If you have second guesses about me, pour some holy water on me. It's in my luggage, under the bed. The knocking becomes pounding, mixed with pretend Raymond's deafening scream. We both jump. Those fuckers. Even Christian rock could not suppress these sounds. Help me, please, it cries desperately, clawing at the door. They saw me and they are going to take me. Rachel climbs into my bed and grabs my arm, her gaze fixated on the door. It is not Raymond. We talked about this. I say it to her as well myself. The desperate tone in its voice is quite convincing. Please do not do this to me. They're gonna kill me. And I am going to watch Netflix. Looks like we both have our hands full for the night. I shout at the door furiously. Rachel stops breathing for a second. I look at her apologetically, but I need to be angry. Otherwise, I would fall into the endless pit of fear and despair. How can you be so cruel? I am begging. What it was trying to say before something cuts its throat, judging by the sound. No matter how many times I hear that gruesome noise, chills will always run down my spine. Is he okay? Asked Rachel sheepishly. It is just a trick. I place my arm in front of her. I know it sounds very convincing, but if you wait 8 more minutes, I will personally escort you to Raymond to check out his well-being, okay? I make her face me. She is one step from pissing herself, passing out, or both. I recognized my 10-year-old self in her. The same pale skin, heavy breathing, the almost floor-touching jaw drop, and the panicking eyes that desperately want to look away from the crime scene. My dad's solution usually consists of giving me such a hard slap that my jaw would actually land on the floor, along with the rest of my body, of course. Sometimes, in situations like this, I feel his punch on my cheeks. It keeps me grounded. Lucky for Rachel, I oppose the idea of hurting the innocent, so I just pull her in a hug and pat her back. Her long, hold-back tears start to flow. I wish I could join her. You fuckers let me die. Oh my god, it is not dead. Who would have thought? Its voice was unnaturally deep, and not just its own. It is more like one creature it's more like more than one creature is speaking at once. Aren't you a little chatty for someone who's dead? I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. You are nothing but a weak insect. I could kill you with only my thumb. How dare you talk to me like that? Wait, I thought you were Raymond. If you were not him, then who are you? If it's stupid enough, it'll tell me its name and I can banish it back to hell. Hopefully, it is more prideful than crafty. I am Lucifer's second in command. Lucifer would send his second in command to scare university students? I shrug. After all, Lilith is here. Maybe hell lost its former glory and now its leaders are in need of a second job just to pay the bills. I cannot stop myself, but imagining Satan as a cashier. I am the World Eater, Diavolo. You better remember that name, because you are going to shout it when I torture you in the eternal flames of hell. Suddenly, silence erupts. Poor guy, he probably had a lot of threats in store for me. But the time limit cut him off. Despite the common knowledge, every demon is different, even with the same type. Each one has its own preference for human meat, torture methods, level of intelligence, favorite TV show, and so on. This one was not the sharpest tool in the shed, and he's gonna pay for it. That's the end of that one, and that's also the last one we're going to have in this one, but oh my goodness, did I like that one. Whew, I really hope that there ends up being like a second to that one, because that one was really, really good. I very, very much enjoyed that one. Yeah, I wasn't aware, because again, like I said, sorry, I'm going to adjust myself. Oof, I shrank down a little bit too much onto the couch. Like I mentioned, I do not read these beforehand, so I did not know that technically, the letter in the girth of that was technically from a guy, but I just kind of read it in the best, like, preppy, upkept way of, like, everything's fine, don't worry about anything weird, that I could. I hope you all enjoyed that. I hope listeners enjoyed that as well. But yeah, I'm gonna keep an eye out on that one. That one's really good. I might have to look up their name just to see if they have any other stories that maybe, like, come after this one, because, oh, it was so good. I mean, this one was only posted, like, 9 hours ago. Gotcha. But yeah, so I definitely, enjoyed that one just in general. Like, I thought it was great. I loved the flow of it. I loved all of it. They did apologize near the end about... That's not it. Where did it go? Okay, I'll find it again. But, I definitely enjoyed the flow of it. I definitely enjoyed the twist at the end, how it kind of, like... I love stories like this that just kind of make you assume that what's going on is a normal, everyday thing for that character. I feel like it always sits very, very well. And I really hope that there ends up being another one to that one, because I would just love to hear more or have like more instances like that, because the main characters like kind of just like thought process and the things that they said were just so much fun. They were so much fun to read and just kind of be like, I'm so fucking annoyed by this already. Like, can we just continue and be done with this already? Like, I've got other shit to do right now. But yeah, that's going to be the end of that for us. I know we only got a few of them today, but we're all good. All right. Thanks everyone for listening today. I hope you all enjoyed the podcast. If you know someone who likes my content, feel free to send me their way in a share. If you would like to send me a message with your own story, rant, question, unpopular opinion, or if you want me to tell others how you fucked up today, or any day, send me a message via any of my social media found in the description below. Just look for my cute little avatar you see on whatever app you're listening on. Please, give a rating if you enjoyed what you heard today. I hear that they help out tremendously. And as always, I will catch y'all next time. Bye! You guys, on the other hand, will still be here while I do the next one. Da-da-da. Alright, and then while I'm waiting for stuff to load really quick, I got to switch back over because I accidentally, for whatever reason, seemed to I wonder if anybody can hear the cat snoring. Sorry, I don't usually have this long of a lull for you guys watching. Why can I not find that one now? There it is. Oh no! I have no idea what that was at all. It was a little creepy. Yeah. I'm not sure what just happened. But yeah, we are gonna go ahead. I don't know what happened. That story that we just read is now gone. Like the thing is there, but yeah, I don't know. We read it just in time. I don't know what else to say about it. But yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and continue on with our next Grandpa series, which is, once I find it, because I have to go all the way down. I have way too many things saved on here, for the record. There it is. Let me switch back over to my intro stuff. Yeah, let me just get my stuff figured out for this real quick, and then we will continue on with our next one. Shoot, I forgot to... La 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 la. Okay. I just have to get something into the description because it won't let me just leave it, which is weird, but you know, whatever. All right. Now we can go ahead and get ready to do for our grandpa series. I don't know why I'm having such issues with this thing today. My holder is just not. Let me go all the way back down. This one. I'm so excited for this. I love this grandpa series. Like, I cannot get across enough how much I really enjoyed this grandpa series. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start the intro for this one. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Phoenix Reads. Today's episode is our grandpa series. That is right. We are on to our 4th episode of the grandpa series. As usual, the username of the user whose story we're reading will be in the description below. Please go give their story and any others that they have done some love. I'm telling you, he is so good. I'm pretty sure it's a he. He does such amazing work. I know that we just had another one of his that isn't part of the grandpa series in our main episode that also came out today. For those watching on YouTube, it was, literally like 20 minutes ago. But yes, he's amazing. I love it. I really cannot get enough of his grandpa series, and I really hope it continues for the time being. Feel free to leave a comment on their post and even tag me in the comments, letting them know that you heard their story here. My username for Reddit is in the description. You can even tag me in stories that you'd like to hear me read. Also, I have not said anything about this yet, and honestly, I feel kind of silly. I did also start a subreddit for the podcast that you can find. It is literally the subreddit Phoenix Reads. You can find it on there. Feel free to leave stories there. Like, you can post on the subreddit, leave stories that you want to have me read. You can leave. I think you can even leave like the links to them or whatever if they're through Reddit, and you can do that on there. But we will get started right after this ad. I always feel bad when I kind of go off on a tangent in the intro. I don't mean to, but it just kind of happens. All right. So I'm going to be 100% kind of clear. I am not sure if I am reading this grandpa series in the order that they came out of. He did send them to me in this order, and so that's kind of the order that I am going with. If it ends up not being right, I don't think it is 110% going to cause a problem if we read it out of order. I know he just kind of mentioned that it's a series, but I don't think it's like, oh, you have to read it in this order for the next one to make sense. At least that's how I felt with these last, 3 episodes. Like, when we read the first one, I was just like, oh, man, I think we might have to, there might be, a setup for the next one. But it hasn't seemed that way. If it has, it's been very subtle, and I have not noticed it. So, yeah. We will kind of go from there. Okay. So we are going to go ahead and get started on this one. Oh, I gotta find it again. There we go. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This one is called The Snake Handler. We were watching TV one night, Grandpa in his chair, and I in Grandma's old rocker. I sighed heavily. It had been a long day. Grandpa had me mending a fence most of the day, a job that required 2 trips to town, the hauling of some heavy materials, and a lot of sweating in the afternoon sun. Of course, Grandpa hadn't done any of that other than riding into town. What he had done was sit on a big rock and watch me work, filling my day with stories about this or that or another. The fence had finally been mended, just as darkness began to creep in, and I was rocking contentedly as we watched something of Grandpa's choosing. Grandpa watched very little television, but when he did, it was usually only 3 things. He watched the news 3 times a day, watched Hadrian Meadows at 8 and 4 for the Fish and Game Report, and liked to watch Spook Central. Spook Central was a show about some local paranormal investigators who liked to go around and inspect haunts in the area. They went to many historic and infamous locations and generally stirred up the things that went bump around there. It came on most nights on Channel 12 in new episodes and reruns, and Grandpa loved it. He watched Spook Central the way some men watch sitcoms. He was always so amused by the crew's antics, and he was always chuckling at something they were saying or doing. On today's episode, they were talking about banishing a demon from the ruins of an old church, and I heard Grandpa scoff as they talked about means of cleansing. "Bunch of hacks," he said, shaking his head. I glanced over at him, raising an eyebrow at the comment. So aside from devil cats, forest lights, and cursed insects, you're also an expert in exorcisms? Of course, he said, confident as ever. I went with my grandma to several houses while she was helping people out. I watched her get rid of all kinds of haunts and spirits that bedeviled people, but I only watched her fail once. He paused for dramatic effect before adding, "Luckily, the snake handling man came around." I looked at him oddly. "The what?" "The snake handling man. What's the matter, boy? Didn't your daddy ever take you to see a snake handler?" "I mean, I saw a man handling snakes at the zoo once, but it sounds like you're talking about one of the religious ones." "Exactly," Grandpa said, getting a little excited. "Except this fella was the real deal." I muted the TV, settling in for another of Grandpa's stories coming on. "Sounds better than anything on TV," I said, turning the rocker to look at him. Grandpa chuckled. "That's because, unlike all that claptrap on the TV, this story is true." When I was about 11, shortly after the cricket incident, my grandmother took me under her wing and decided it was high time I was given a proper education on the ways of the woods. She had me over to her house most every afternoon, so I could learn herbcraft and woodcraft. She taught me about healing with poultices and salves, about repelling things that might want to get into the house with symbols, and a little constructed things that hold intention. She also taught me more about the creatures of the forest and the old things that lurked in the deep parts. Grandma was a wealth of information. I wish I had been more thankful for the short time I'd had with her. I had studied with her for about 6 months when I arrived one afternoon to find her putting some things into a bag. I had seen her do this many times before, but the longer I watched her, the more I realized that this was different. We had gone to people's houses before to cleanse a present or dispel a haunt, but I had always watched her select her ingredients with care and decisiveness. Today, her hands shook as she selected herbs and bundles, and as one of the bottles slid from her shaking hands, I felt my blood run cold. For the first time in my life, I was seeing my grandmother afraid. "Despite my better judgment, I'm taking you with me tonight. Not for any lacking in yourself. You're a fine boy. But this place we're going is bad." "Bad?" I asked, unsure what she meant. "How do you mean?" She gave me an extremely hard look, as though she were weighing the idea of telling me things I might not be prepared to hear. "You know about haunts. You've seen the lights. You've seen the darkness that can find you when you least expect it. What we're going after tonight might be worse. Sometimes there are things that can get into a house and make it bad. Bad as can be. These things can make people bad too. But, I stuttered, the fear creeping into me now. You've put those things out before. That's true, but this is different. This is the true evil, the old evil, the kind they talk about in church. I've faced it before, but this time feels different. This time. She paused and weighed the blow again before she dealt it. I'm not sure I have the strength or the will to cast them out. She gathered her provisions as I sat pondering the nature of our work that night. Then, as the afternoon sun began to dip just the teeniest bit, we set out for our work. We arrived as the sun hit the midpoint of its set, and I immediately wished I had never left my grandmother's home. Have you ever seen a place from your car, a perfectly normal place, and just feel like it was wrong? You couldn't tell why, and you wouldn't say why, but the whole place just makes your skin crawl. The shadows linger a little too thickly around the porch. The darkness nestled like bugs in the eaves, and the whole place just seems like a grinning mouth inviting you to come on in. You drive past, and you shudder, but you just aren't sure why you shuddered or what makes the place so scary. The house had an aura about it, and I could see Grandma getting more nervous as well. The woman who answered the door was a friend of Grandma's. I'd seen at the house before. I thought her name might be Ella or Ellen, but she had never looked so ragged as she did now. Her gray hair was a mess, all tangled and looking worry-worn. Her face was pitted with worry lines, and she seemed on the verge of tears. Whether they were tears of relief or sorrow, I wasn't sure. Thank God, Liza, come in. I didn't know who else to. But then she noticed me, and her face clouded over. Are you sure you want to bring him here? He's learning the trade, Els. The boy needs to see what it's like. He has to be prepared for what he might face. The woman nodded and led us into her small home. It was a little more than a one-story farmhouse, set back against the rock of the mountain. The place had a musty smell that made me think the roof likely leaked in the spring when the snow melt came off the hills, and it held a darkness that reminded me of a cave. The woman led us to her kitchen, casting frightened glances at a shadowy room that lay beyond a tacked-up quilt. She made us tea and talked to us about what had been happening. Grandma smiled and nodded, the smoke from the tea ringing her face, but I barely listened. My eyes were only for what lay beyond that simple quilt. It wasn't a noise, but like a low hum that seemed to warble across the senses. I had a friend years later, a drinking buddy that lived under one of those big power lines. I used to hate getting drunk over there because I knew I wouldn't sleep a wink unless I blacked out. That hum, that soft quarreling of currents and watts, always reminding me always reminded me of that sound I heard from behind that quilt. Ooh. It was like tiny people discussing monumental things. Like hateful men planning mischief quietly. And so I called you, the woman said, and I found myself jerked back to the conversation, her voice jagging up on the end of tears. I'll do what I can, Ellie, but this sort of thing might be beyond me. I've never done battle with anything like you're talking about, and I'm not sure that my talents will be enough to rid you of it. Have you contacted the Catholic parish over in Elijah? This sounds more like their ball of wax. I wrote them when it started, when he came back from the quarry like this, but they never wrote me back. I've spoken to the Baptist preacher, the Pentecostal man, even that snake handler down the hollow, you know the one? The one with the revival tent that blew into town about a month ago. You're the only one who's come to help me." Grandma soaked all of this in and gave a stoic nod. Then she finished her tea and asked to see Darnell. As Ellie walked towards the quilt, I felt my stomach tighten. She slid it aside, the motion so much like that of a baker or as a barker as he slid the cover away from a freak show tent and revealed the most darkly hideous man I'd ever seen at the time. Calling him fat would not have done him justice. Durrell, a man I realized later that I knew, looked like someone in the late stages of pregnancy and who was preparing to birth 8 or 9 children. He lay on a couch that sagged beneath him, and the smell of that small room, no doubt once a sitting room, was atrocious. Durrell had clearly been just going where he would, and the smell was a rank miasma. He lay on his back, his head lolling on his neck, as his stomach pressed upward like a hillock. His gorge was of writhing flesh, purple and veined, and pulsing like an egg sac ready to burst. The room was shadowy, the windows covered, and only the barest of light spilling through the opening to the sitting room. I didn't want to go in there, but when my grandma put a hand on my shoulder, I felt an assuredness roll through me and knew that everything would be okay. When we stepped into the room, the man let his head flop back on his neck and stared at us in that upside-down way that children often do. He began to burble wetly to himself as we approached, a soupy, marshy sound that pulsed like tar from his bulging lips. When did he begin to... Grandma seemed to search for the words before flapping her hands at him. "Get like this," she finally said, words discerning her in her face of this mountainous man. "About a week. About 3 days before I called you. He came back from the quarry one night, well after dark, and just wasn't himself. The next 2 days he was laid up. I thought he might have a flu, but then I woke up one morning and found him on the couch, and he started swelling, and I called the doctor to check him out. After the doctor couldn't find nothing wrong with him, he suggested I make him comfy and see if he overdid or not. That night, I lay in bed and watched the shadows dance on the walls. I heard him laughing and gargling in the sitting room, and I saw this strange light coming from the doorway. That's when I hung up the quilt, and the next day, I came to see you." Grandma looked like she wanted to say more, but when she looked down, she realized that the rounded man was staring straight at her. When his mouth slid open, his purple tongue lolling out, his rancid breath was nearly as bad as the words that spilled out around it. "Witch," he rasped. "Witch, witch, witch!" As he gravelled out his accusation, the scant light we had began to flicker. The walls began to spin a little, the shadows dancing as the oppressive darkness became more claustrophobic. The swollen cadaver began to rock as he cackled and accused. And I pressed myself against my grandma as the night bled into the couple's humble abode. "Ellie Mae, how could you let a witch into our house? You know what it says in the good book about suffering witches to live." "I would assume that whatever you are, you likely have some understanding about what the Bible says about demons as well." The fleshy hillock laughed, and I could swear that hands seemed to be pressing against its body from the inside as I watched it. "Do you imagine that you can cast me out?" it asked, voice full of scorn. "Do you imagine that your grasping power is a match for mine?" Grandma reached into her pocket and pulled out a bundle of sage as if in an answer. That's how it began. Grandma lit the sage, its smoke wafting and dancing as it seemed to telegraph in the darkness. The smoke took on the forms of warding, swirling around the dark shapes that surrounded the swollen hulk on the couch. As the smoke swirled, Grandma chanted in the old words she had yet to teach me and never truly would, it turns out. She seemed to have become smoke herself as she swayed amongst that darkness, and as her hands reached towards me, I would place items into them. Policies and charms, herbs and items of power, and it was as if my hands knew the things she needed before my brain truly did. She dabbed the man with the concoctions, wafted smoke and charm over him, and I saw him shudder as she worked. He did not like her work, but it seemed to be no more than an irritation upon his skin. As time passed, I began to feel as though the sun must rise soon. It had to have been hours, days since Grandma began, and I could see the sweat standing out on her. She was growing tired, her energy depleting, and that only seemed to encourage this hateful specter. He cackled and snapped his teeth at her, the bones coming together like rocks in a quarry, and I found myself growing cold as I watched him rebuff her attempts to cast him away. "Foolish old woman, your incantations are no more than the banging of bones and the screeching of apes. I was old when you first scratched against the dirt, and you cannot face me and win, shaman." Grandma didn't let it show, but it appeared she had come to the same conclusion. She began to retreat, the two of us backing towards the quilted egress point, but the shadows would not allow it. They closed in around that square of light, thick and claustrophobic, and I feared to let them touch me. It appeared that dueling to a draw would not be enough for whatever resided within Darrell. It wanted to win, and it knew that it had us on the ropes. Grandma looked down at me as she came to realize this as well and apologized as she drew me close. Then, the door banged open like a gunshot, and I heard the hard tack of boots on the sturdy boards as someone came towards the sitting room. The darkness parted for that one, and as he surveyed the scene, he smiled in a loony/sane way that men do when they have spent too much time away from men. The way woods folks or desert dwellers sometimes smile when tried by some child of the fluorescent lights and the steady pavement who have never known true darkness as more than a dim movie screen. He wore a long coat, his chest bare, with shabby jeans that nearly covered his run-down cowboy boots. He had a wide-brim hat, less like a cowboy's and more like a farmer's or a preacher's, and on his belt hung a writhing sack that hissed and rattled. The hair that poked from beneath his hat, was as white as muddy midday clouds, and he looked like a scarecrow filled with barbed wire. I have no doubt that he was a little bit crazy, but he was the sanity we needed at that moment. He came striding into the room, untying the sack from his belt, and the creature's glee seemed forced now. Some new shaman to come try his luck. Come to me, pretender. His luck. Come to me, pretender. Come to me and know what it means to stand before Legion. The man's voice was at odds with his appearance, and his voice was rich and strident as it cut the shadows in the house to ribbons. I am no pretender, and you are no Legion. You are a sad collection of lesser demons, fit only to scare children and vex those who are used to fighting less than practical creatures. No offense, my dear. Grandma seemed to take his declaration well from her stunned position near the door. When he reached inside the bag, the hollow rattle preceding the biggest timber rattler I had ever seen, the creature cowered a little as the face of the betrayer came out to greet him. Here is your brother, Prince of Lies and Lord of Flies. Come now before the throne and feel his judgment. He held the rattler around his head and his thumb controlling the top as his fingers opened that killing mouth. The couch shook as the mountainous man tried to escape him, but as the strange man began to pray, really spinning the hellfire, I saw the snake begin to glow. Its head and body were suddenly wreathed in a glowing aura, and that aura began to draw darkness from Darrell. The murk seemed to come swimming from his open mouth, and as it entered the serpent, the preacher dropped it, and it watched it try to escape. Then, as swift as any snake, the snake handler brought the bottom of that big, run-down boot onto the snake's head and smashed it out of existence. The man-thing on the couch screamed in agony, its gelatinous body quaking like water in a pool, but the snake handler was far from done. He reached in again and drew out another snake, the black body of a moccasin coming from the bag this time. It hissed and reared at him, but he had caught it just so, and its writhing stopped as the cornea of light enveloped it. The feet of the couch squealed in protest as the demon tried to lunge away, but that had made their vessel too large, and escape seemed like a happy dream before those dripping fangs. His bag was limitless. The snake handler seemed to pull more varieties of serpent from his croaker sack than I had ever seen before. Some were venomous, some were just plain old slitherers, but their fate was always the same. The floor was soon thick with clotted snake blood, and the man on the couch seemed to be shrieking with every otherworldly presence pulled from him. All at once, he was less of a mountain and more of a rounded boulder. Suddenly, he was merely portly, his flesh still stretched and bruised where the demons had taken up inside of him. He tried to flee once, his legs buckling under him before the snake handler could catch his shoulder and push him back against the couch. The snake he pulled from the bag was the biggest yet, a massive rattlesnake with glistening fangs, and the demon quaked within him, knowing his time had come. "You dare not! You dare not! You are nothing! I was old when your ancestors drew out of the primordial ooze. My ancestors stumbled naked from the garden, wretch, and you will return to the pits from whence you came." The demon's scream cascaded around us as he was laboriously drawn from the man, and the snake actually turned to strike as it fell heavy to the floor. The boot came down nonetheless, and the snake handler seemed to sag as the man on the couch breathed like a long-distant runner passing the finish line. Somehow, it had escaped my notice that the shadows were receding as he worked, and we now stood in the dimly lit sitting room of Ellie and Darrell's house. Darrell wouldn't wake for another 3 days, and when he did, he told my grandma about breaking through into an underground tunnel and falling into a pool of the coldest water he had ever felt. As he pulled himself out, shivering on the bank, he was assaulted by things he could not see. And he had known nothing until he came to on his couch. He didn't remember the snake handler, the demons, or anything. Darrell lived until 1973, dying at the age of 93, and he always thanked God for his longevity. He should really have thanked the snake handler, though, because otherwise the demons would have likely just ate him up. That night, though, with his work completed, the snake handler bent down and scooped up the remains of his snakes into the crocker sack. He tipped his hat to Ellie now, hugging her husband and crying over him, and told her he was real sorry for the mess. He clomped out the door, stopping only long enough to look down at Grandma and me and pass a word with us. "You gave it your best, you child of the white, but there was just too much for one person. You did your best. Know that God sees your efforts." Then he left, never to be seen again in these parts. I had stopped rocking at some point in the story and was now simply sitting, gape-mouthed, and staring at my grandpa. "Quite a tale, isn't it?" Grandpa asked, his old chair creaking a little as the two of us sat in the aftermath. "So," I started, trying to figure out what I wanted to say. "So you know a little about the backwoods ways? Like your grandma knew?" "Some," he admitted. "Grandma died before she could properly finish my training. But that is a whole different story, and one I'll need to prepare before I tell it." "Could you teach me?" I asked, fully aware by now that there were things in this world, in this very forest, that I didn't understand and did not want to run afoul of. Grandpa smiled. Son, I would be delighted. And that is the end of The Snake Handler. Like I mentioned, this is the 4th in our Grandpa series. That's just what I'm calling it. If anybody has a better title for the series, please feel free. Leave them. Leave the comments, leave suggestions. If you are listening on Spotify, you can comment in a way. I usually try to make it so that way everything that can be commented on. If you are listening on the Anchor app, again, you should be able to comment and stuff on there. If you're watching / listening on YouTube, please feel free to leave down in the comments if you've got a better idea for a title. But for right now, I think the Grandpa series fits it perfectly. Thanks everyone for listening today. I hope you all enjoyed the podcast. If you know someone who likes my content, feel free to send me their way in a share. If you would like to send me a message with your own story, rant, question, unpopular opinion, or you want me to tell others how you fucked up today, or any day, send me a message via any of my social media found in the description below. Just look for my cute little avatar you see on whatever app you're listening on. Please, give a rating if you enjoyed what you heard today. I hear that they help out tremendously. And as always, I will catch y'all next time. Bye! Woo! So I'm just going to go ahead and leave here with you guys. But I know I said I was going to mass record today, but it looks like I'm only going to get 2 out. I think I only have 2 more to do. Hopefully I will be able to get them done. 1 tomorrow morning, if you're watching now. Which will be Thursday morning, and then probably I won't be able to do anything else until either Monday morning or maybe Friday during the day. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll see if we can't do another daytime stream. But yeah, I will see you guys next time. I hope you all enjoyed. Have a good one. Bye. I can't push buttons.